I'm here with Johnson today, who I have been following for a couple years on Twitter now. And Johnson, I want to start with reading out a set of tweets you sent out a few months ago and then rambling a bit about my intention for this conversation today. The tweets go something like this. My current best pitch for parent relationship work is, quote, come for the suck reduction, stay for the most powerful spiritual practice and contact with the divinity I've come across thus far. My work with my mom has simply been by far the clearest and most powerful path to connecting with sacredness, divinity, and grace. It's filled the hole in my heart. Easiest thing to point at is a 95% reduction in harsh inner critique and just completely believing that I am lovable. My parents have been the most obvious vessel of divine love and grace in my life, and I doubt I'm unique in this experience. What feels powerful about this is that at no point have I needed to put faith in anything. I trusted my trust and distrust. Quote, do I trust my mom's love? How much do I actually believe she loves me? How much did her parents love her? And apart from these tweets, I've also read your tweets over the last couple of years where you have shared rich details about your conversations with your mother. And it's felt really heartwarming and inspiring for me. And I believe that you're touching upon something deeply powerful here. A relationship with parents is a big area of pain or struggle for a lot of people, understandably so. And even for those whom it's not a struggle, vulnerably showing up with parents is not easy or avoided. I definitely avoid it despite sharing a decent relationship with my parents. And something else that evokes interest in this for me is seeing it as a spiritual practice. There's this famous Ramdas quote which goes like, if you think you are enlightened, go and spend a week with your family. And yeah, there's so much juice here. And as a spiritual practice or a self-exploration practice, parent relationship deepening is very underrated and under-discussed. Some people, admirably so, dedicate all of their lives around certain spiritual practices, bringing a lot of rigor and determination and contribution to the development of that practice. And what if we could bring a similar kind of rigor and drive and sacredness and dialogue to the spiritual practice of deepening your relationship with your parents? And I see you kind of doing that, and that's why I'm excited to talk to you about it. And I'll pause here and give you the space to reflect on all of that.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's sweet to hear. I noticed there's some like excitement and even a bit of like confusion in me or something, or like in the sense of like, oh, like I feel like I don't get to talk about this often. And so I'm also like, oh, I'm not quite sure how to talk about it. Um, but like I'm excited for the opportunity. I feel like one important caveat is that I haven't been very spiritual throughout my life. Actually, like really at all. Like I didn't grow up religious. I had some general disdain of religion and spirituality through most of my life. And yeah. So when I say that it's the most powerful one that I've come across, take it with a grain of salt. Um, but also on the other side of it is like there's a way in which it like kind of like grabbed me, put kicking and screaming into it.
Mhm.
And so I think that counts for something too. Like I think throughout most of my life, I would have said like, yeah, divinity, sacredness, that kind of sounds made up. Um, And it's only kind of through this stuff with my mom that I've been like, oh, maybe it's not made up.
Mhm. Yeah. I would love to start a little before you started on this journey. Like, how were things before you explicitly, proactively focused on deepening your relationship with your mother, and what was happening leading up to it, like in your inner life and in your relationships?
Yeah. So most of my life, my relationship with my mom was really challenging. Um, and I would have actually said that I was trying to change it pretty much my entire life, just unsuccessfully. Um, but yeah, um, most of my since teenage years, I couldn't spend more than a day or two with her without getting in a fight, without um, one-way screaming match or hurtful things being said. Um, in retrospect, I didn't trust her much at all. Um, yeah, I doubted pretty much everything she said. Um, I would have like I I was Lord, mature. I labeled her a narcissist. Um, yeah, I didn't believe that she gave a shit about what I wanted, how I felt, how anyone else felt. Like I perceived her as just only doing what she wanted. Kind of regardless how it impacted other people. Um, yeah, I didn't like her. I would try and spend as little time as I could with her while also balancing with the part of me that um felt like I needed to or should spend time with her. It's like a filial piety, Asian culture. So out for the holidays, but I when I could go to college, I certainly didn't choose to go to the local university. Um, even when I lived back in Seattle for a year, I didn't want to live at home. Um, yeah, there was definitely I created plenty of distance with her. Yeah, there's a way in which I quit my job 5 years ago, and there's a way in which part of the psychological undertones of that was like, oh, like some sort of running away, some sort of resentment, some sort of like hopelessness or something, some story that like, oh, like I'm gonna have to take care of my mom in the future anyways. I might as well at least enjoy my life for a few years. Um, yeah, so those are some of the things that how I would have characterized talking like my relationship with her.
And how did that show up in other areas of your life?
Like foundational. Mm, I mean, I mentioned like the inner critic stuff, the shame stuff. Yeah, I was pretty harsh on myself.
Mhm.
I didn't feel like, generally didn't feel enough. Generally felt like desperate for love and affection from other people. Um, I had just like a general desperate fear of being alone through most of my life. I think that like certainly this was a large part of that. Um, I was always like prioritizing my own kind of like hedonistic impulses because I felt like I deserved it or something, or like I was allowed to because subconsciously I was dumping energy into this endless pit that was my mom. Um, I generally actually had no sense of like I wanted who I was, what I wanted, how I felt. I was just like very completely disconnected from myself. Um, because I never learned to growing up how to connect to myself or that there was even a self to connect to. Mm. Yeah, those are some ways.
Yeah.
Um,
And
oh, I was terrified of. I was like, joy and excitement were pretty much the only like whitelisted feel emotions in my experience growing up, and so I was often very excitable and happy, and any other feeling I pretended that I didn't have. Um, Sadness, anger, helplessness, fear, yeah, anything like that.
and now I want to invite you to fast forward to now to just contrast what it is like now, and then later maybe we can go into what the journey was like for you.
Sure. Yeah, what it's like now.
Yeah.
Like largely it's beautiful. Yeah, let's see. Uh, Call my parents more often. Look forward to seeing them. I, I've what in the last year I've like lived with them probably for a month at a time twice, and it's been just like really sweet and harmonious. I feel loved by my mom. I feel so grateful for her. Like this, like it's like this gift that keeps on giving. Like, like it's like changed large swaths of my life multiple times already, and I'm still like, it's like it. Yeah, like I don't know when, like if it, yeah, when it ends or something like that. I feel like she trusts me. I feel like I trust her, or at least trust her appropriately, like not like muddied by decades of judgments, misunderstanding, and pain. The family unit is in a little better shape. My dad shared with me that like actually like as my relationship with her improved, his relationship with her has improved too, which I didn't expect.
It's beautiful.
It was like incredible to hear.
Yeah.
Because it turns out one of the buckets of things that was hard for them in relationship was she would get mad at me, and then she would bitch and moan about it to my dad, and my dad is now in this difficult situation because he loves me also. And then they would fight about that. But now like they don't fight about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You don't mention your father much in your writings, and I'm curious what that has been like for you, because I imagine there's as much intensity in that relationship or as much uh, potential for deepening in that relationship. And
yeah.
yeah, I'm curious what that has been like for you and why the focus has been your relationship with your mother for you.
Yeah. My relationship with my dad has largely been like really loving throughout my life. I've always been really grateful for him. Growing up, like I wanted to be like him. Um, Largely my relationship with my dad feels really easy, and straightforward. And there's certainly challenges in it,
Yeah.
um, occasionally, but like it largely feels almost it's like almost negligible. It's like no, there is stuff like occasionally will think of like oh like maybe I should talk to my dad about this,
Mhm.
and I do that occasionally, but yeah, I
And
just like always felt really loved and cared for by him, and just like so grateful for him. And largely usually like all I want, like actually I feel a little emotional speaking. It's just like I I mostly just want him to know how much I love him and how much I appreciate him and stuff. Yeah, it feels like a very easy flowing relationship, and for the most part, there have been maybe some challenging patches, but yeah.
that's lovely. And for you, was there a specific point in time or some turning point where you felt like you proactively wanted to work? on your relationship with your mother, despite all the pain it might bring to the surface, despite how much triggering it was going to be. And yeah, what motivated you to do that?
Yeah. I mean, again, like I would say, like most of my life, I tried to change it, just unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
And that looked like every time I saw her, I'd be like, okay, we're not gonna get in a fight this time. When we get in a fight,
Mm.
I just gotta suppress it harder. Like just like be cool, like and of course that doesn't work. Um, and so predictably that never worked. Um, the what insp like what went into the time that actually did change things was I was at this residency in France, um, run by my friend Carl. Um, and at this residency we were basically like full time doing NVC and IFS. And just like really diving deep into it and just like kind of living and embodying it and kind of with each other every day, living in community and stuff. And yeah, so I do all these IFS sessions there, and I at the end of them, I'd always be talking about my mom. And I was like, oh, what's up with that? Seems like there's a pattern here. Maybe I should go try and do something about that. Um, and so yeah, that was kind of the inspiration.
And so I imagine there was a lot of inner work that was foundational to you even considering doing that and
Mm.
having the resources to step into that space. And and then when you were actively working on your relationship with your mother, were you staying with him or with her, or like were you away from her? What was the situation like?
Yeah, so like the main chunk of time where most of the a lot of the action happened, I went to Taiwan for 2.5 months with like this intention to
Mhm.
like work on a relationship. So yeah, so I was staying with her. Um, I don't know, I would take like a weekend trip with friends kind of thing occasionally, but yeah, basically I was staying with her and my dad.
Yeah, and there's this set of tweets where you kind of break down your uh, approach or what the pillars for you in doing this work. And you list out 4 pillars, and I would love to go into each of those one by one. So the first is inner work, which I think we already touched upon, and relational work, which I guess is connected to that. And then creating space, time, and building capacity. And yeah, is there anything that you'd like to add to the inner work and relational work? Like what kind of things were helpful for you? What kind of skills that you picked up in that were helpful? And yeah, anything in that general territory.
Yeah. Um, yeah, all that stuff is really helpful and really important. I'd say let's see, like let's start with like all of those things to me are valuable in and of their own, like in their own right. Like doing like the inner work is worth it, like for me, whether or not it impacts my relationship with my mom. Same with the relational work, same with the building the capacity. Like all of that is just like 2 thumbs up, like great, meaningful, supportive, satisfying, so on and so forth, in my opinion. Um, And then I can speak about them in terms of how they impacted my relationship with my mom, like the work with my mom and the functionality.
Yeah,
I'd say like the inner work was most helpful for it's like validating and legitimizing my experience or something, like the pain, the challenge. Um, And the impact of that when I show up with my mom is like I think it allowed me to show up with more centeredness. And it allowed me to it helped me trust my experience more. And it helped me like be less triggered, basically, like be more regulated. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. And so I think that's all like kind of foundationally important and
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. And I imagine something like IFS parts work in general, for me, it's also so useful for just modeling the other person's mind. Uh, when you can take the idea of no bad parts and apply it to your own system, you can also extend it to uh, yeah, your other relationships, and then see their unwholesome actions as the scared parts. And yeah, just adds more dimensionality to what otherwise can be a black and white experience, especially when we are triggered. And yeah, for me, learning to validate my own parts or my own experience, attend to my parts that are suffering, also naturally builds my capacity to do it same for others.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
I appreciate you bringing that up actually, because like, yeah, I would say like the kind of philosophy principle that IFS brought to me was foundational for like kind of being able to shift things with my mom. Because exactly, it's like the no bad parts thing. It's like for the first time in my life, I showed up with my mom from a place of not trying to change her, but of like, how can I like love and accept her as she is? And if I can't, like, what is it in me that prevents me from doing that?
yeah,
So I feel like it also invited a lot of self-responsibility. Um, and then kind of as you're alluding to, also it invited like more compassion or at least more like openness to compassion of like not necessarily assuming that she's just like shitty and evil.
yeah,
That there's something in there in her system
yeah,
that matters, even if I don't understand it.
yeah, yeah. There's, I imagine there was something for you that shifted around, like how you talked about labeling her as a narcissist. And even though that can be a useful label in some context, I imagine like shifting from that to seeing her as a collection of many parts with conflicting desires and needs, trying to protect herself or trying to help you in some ways. I think that in itself just opens up a lot.
Definitely. Yeah.
And when you talk about relational work, uh, are there any particular skills that you picked up in that work that were very much helpful?
Yeah. I'd say like, and basically it was like mostly like authentic relating, nonviolent communication, circling. Um, yeah, and I think they were all really helpful, um, in slightly different ways. Um,
Could you elaborate a bit on what about it was helpful? Like, how did they empower you in ways that you weren't empowered before?
yeah. I'd say one big one is just is it's actually similar to something I just said, but it's like speaking in a way that like from a place of like self ownership,
Hmm.
like speaking about my experience and like staying focused on my experience and doing less of the projecting and you're doing this, like staying with me. Um, I think that's like really important in terms of like yeah, like if a conversation's already going to be difficult, like the more I can stand myself, the less likely I am to trigger the other person, dysregulate the other person, and then like the less likely they are to then dysregulate me. Um, that's kind of like the functional benefit of it. Um, but it's also just like more true. And um, yeah, so I think like those practices, like MVC, like speaking about the feelings. What are the feelings? What are the needs? What are the feelings? What are the needs? Like that kind of to me is kind of just like the foundation of NVC. And then yeah, like authentic relating, circling, like I think it's an opportunity to practice that. Um, it's also a opportunity to practice like being with someone and slowing down. Like often like those practices invite slowing down. And to like feel to be able to with another human slow down, return to myself, figure out how I'm feeling, and then share that. Like that basic skill or like that basic like move um is like so critical for staying grounded and present in a conversation rather than running away with like the stories and the triggering and the it's like like that's just like the practice, the reps almost of like coming back to myself with another person, which is different from doing it on my own, like in a
Yeah,
I don't know, session or something.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And from
yeah.
here, I want to flow into the third one, which is creating space and time, yeah, which feels simple but vital because I see it in myself, and uh, I imagine other people can relate to that. It's easy to just stay caught up in your own inner work and relational work. And even if you don't stay caught up just in your inner work, just keeping your relational work to other easier relationships in your life. And yeah, it's at least for me personally, like this is where I am struggling the most, where I am not intentionally creating the space and time to connect with my parents because things generally feel good and my life generally feels great. And so there's no like, yeah, pain for me to create that space and time or to have that, I don't know, some kind of impulse to make that happen. And yeah, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but yeah, I want to explore one, why it is essential to create space and time, what it looks like, what are some of the even practical, tactical ways of doing that, and uh, what are some fun or easy ways of doing that, and uh, yeah, I'm imagining that there's a lot of room for creativity here, and so yeah, now opening the space for you to add your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a hard one. Um, I had the, I think in retrospect, this one was easier for me because I had already quit my job. I had decided that I wanted to do this. I went to Taiwan. I had the flexibility to just go and spend a few months living with my parents and not have work or other obligations or other things that would be taking my energy. Um, and my mom is free, um, and like available enough. And so I think for a lot of people, like I said, actually, I feel like for a lot of people, this is like one of the main bottlenecks. It's like, oh, like if you got a job, it's like this work is hard. Like I always describe this as the hardest thing I've done in my life. Um, also by far the most rewarding, but like, it's like hard. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
Um, it's like it touches some of the stuff that I spent most of my life running away from. Um, so to create that kind of time and space, like at least the way that I did it, I think is honestly actually like prohibitively high for most people. Just even logistically. Um, like even in like daily life, like to set aside like I have one person that I see regularly, like a coaching client, basically. I mean, a friend, but um, for this parent and family relations stuff. And it's like, yeah, they actually, I'm like really proud and excited and in admiration of like the progress that they have made with their their mom, their family. Um, and it's like, yeah, like frequently we'll talk about like, oh, like, do you feel like you could have this conversation with your mom? And she'll be like, oh, like I don't know if I have the time or space for it. Or like, like maybe next. It's like these are frequently very emotionally draining conversations. Um, and like only make sense in some cases only make sense if you're seeing your parents. Um, but then there's the catch 22, right? Where it's like, oh, like if you have all these challenges with your problem with your parents, you probably made a bunch of space with your parents. And so the whole point is that you don't see them very often. But then so then it's not so relevant or alive. And so like actually, yeah, there's a lot of challenges, I think, in actually making the time and space for it.
Yeah, there's definitely the challenging aspect, and then there's also the bit about why do it? Like, uh, like if not consciously, then at least unconsciously, because, like you said, it's definitely not easy. It's emotionally draining, and uh, it's hard logistically. Uh, so yeah, before we get into like what would be the ways to creatively solve it, yeah, I'd love to, yeah, invite you to just, I don't know, maybe give a pitch of what's the big payoff here, and yeah, anything that you would like to say in that direction.
A pitch. I'm like still soaking it in. Like I still don't even know the full extent. Um, but I can speak to some of it, like at least what I've experienced so far.
Yeah, yeah, especially would love for you to elaborate on the spiritual dimension of it. That it's not just fixing a relationship in your life or just, I don't know, healing certain traumas. There's certainly like a lot more going on here, and a lot of us like do dedicate a lot of time and space and resources to other spiritual practices. We go out of our way to maybe go on retreats or spend hundreds of hours on the cushion meditating, and because at some level we are convinced about the payoff of those things. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do believe that there's a similar, if not much bigger, payoff available here, because like given the intensity it carries, like I think you can use that to predict that if you were to able to bring love and peace in that relationship, how it like downstream of that there would be so many beautiful things that would emerge in your life. But yeah, would love to hear you on
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, so I've mentioned like at least one or two, I think, like the reduction in harshness that like pays dividends every day. Um, it's changed how I relate how like every relationship. Um, like the desperate edge that I used to have in relating to anyone, friend or platonically or otherwise, like has gone down a lot. Um, in terms of like I like it felt like I was always historically always like grasping for like please love me, please like me. And now I'm like, oh, like I have been loved my whole life. I'm like surrounded in this ocean of it. Like obviously more is better. Like yeah, like I like to be liked and loved. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's like I don't need it. Um that one's like hard to quantify, but there's like just like a like that's like a really big deal. Like to just feel loved. Like or to
Yeah.
know that I'm loved. It feels it's like the whole. It's like like there's like not feeling like there's the whole anymore. Like there's just like a kind of different quality of being or something. There's just like a greater ease. There's just like generally less grasping. There's less like, maybe I would describe it like there's like subconscious grasping or something,
Hmm.
like at all times or something. I feel like I associate that with having the whole, like the grasp, like maybe this, like even more broadly than relationships. And now it feels like it's not that I don't grasp, I certainly, but like it just feels it's like it feels less strong. And when I notice it, it feels much easier to let go of. And it's just like everything is just like a lot chiller and easier. Um, not everything, but a lot of things.
Yeah. I think
Yeah, is
yeah, I was just gonna add that the uh, inner critic one feels like just a one thing, but I think it's huge. And a lot of the critical voices in our heads can be directly traced back to the voices of our parents. And yeah, I think, yeah,
Mhm.
deepening your relationship with your parents is the most direct way of engaging with that critical voice and helping that critical
Yeah,
voice in your head relax. I think you
yeah,
can spend a lot of time doing parts work, and yes, you can, uh, yeah, gain a lot of relief. But yeah, I think that there's something about doing it directly, which can be much more transformative in a shorter duration.
yeah. That's my like hypothesis also. It's like, oh, the part of me that says that I'm not lovable. Like that's based on direct experience. Like that didn't just like pop like
Yeah,
it, like it's not like I have gripes with some of like the hippie like the mantras like I am lovable or like I am blah 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 I am blah. Not that they're wrong, not that they're untrue,
yeah,
but there's almost a like dishonoring or something of my own experience that I interpret rightly or wrongly from that. It's like, oh, like no, like it's true. I didn't believe like the belief I'm not lovable exists because I didn't feel loved.
yeah,
And then so like okay, like well, to feel lovable, I need to feel loved. That makes sense. And like it's like I can bootstrap that. Like I can start over now and I can start to fill my cup of feeling loved by myself and by people around me.
yeah,
Sure, like eventually, like, over many years, like I will start to believe more and more in my lovedness. Um, or in my opinion, like a much more efficient way like in some ways, right? Obviously, like there's a lot is like there were people that at least intellectually I'm aware have loved me. I just can't feel it. Like I go just like I could put in all this effort and like I could unblock that love to feel it. And then now I get like now I mean I have this 30-year backlog of love. Like the problem is I just can't access it. Like if I could just unblock it, then now I feel got 30 years of love and now I'm like, oh, obviously I'm loved. And then like get closed. Like that one's solved, you know?
yeah. What was it like for you? Like, would love some details here to arrive at that. Like, what conversation or what turning point or what clicked where you were able to let all of that love in? And yeah, what was that process like to take in that 30 years of backlog of love?
Yeah, I mean, like overwhelming, like divine, like when I see pictures about or like hear about like oh people having these religious experiences where they're just like filled with this like overwhelming grace. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably this. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, it continues to be overwhelming. Like I feel like I'm still like scratching the surface or something. Um, but the first time, yeah, I was able to let this in was actually it was over the phone. It was a few weeks after I had left Taiwan on this like major working on my relationship with her thing, and we had a phone call in the morning, like with her and her and my dad, and like it got kind of testy, like I was getting kind of frustrated. Like it didn't escalate, but like, hung up. And later on, after a bit, I messaged her and I was like, hey, like I know I got kind of frustrated on the call. Like, I'm sorry. Like I just like just whenever we talk, like I have this like kind of like edge. I'm like always a little bit defensive because I feel like you're trying to change me. And so I'm like always like a little. And she messaged back like, oh, I haven't been trying to change you since Taiwan. And I was like, oh, cool. Thanks. And like I just sat with this all day. Like it just kept like I couldn't stop thinking about it. And at some point I was like, I think I've been waiting to hear that for 30 fucking years. And like eventually that night I got home and I just bawled my eyes out. I just like cried for I don't know, half an hour for an hour. I'm like looking at old photos of us and it's like my mom is not trying to change me. There's nothing wrong with me. Like my mom loves me as I am. My mom has always loved me as I am. Like there's not like I am lovable. Like and actually like I've like this has been true the whole time. Like I've been like loved and bathing in this ocean of love this whole time and I just couldn't see it or feel it. Um, yeah. Yeah, and that like was very much like a before and after day in my life. Like it was like I like after that like the critical voices kind of just went down mostly, like 95%. Um yeah, it's really incredible among other things. Yeah.
Yeah, you also talk about this fourth pillar, which is building capacity, which I feels like it feels very essential because yeah, I think there's a reason why deepening your relationship with your parents or even just having a yeah, peaceful relationship with your parents is incredibly hard for so many people that it's super triggering. It's yeah, it gets complicated. All the feelings get mixed up, and uh, when you're in the middle of that, it's hard to like intellectually you can know that oh, I should not do XYZ in this situation, or I have to come back to my experience, or uh, I have to not get angry at them, etc. But yeah, practically speaking, that's super difficult to do, understandably so. And yeah, curious what it was like for you to navigate that space. Like what
Mm.
helped you, and in what ways were you strategic about it?
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this topic and like I actually if you don't mind, like I'd like to continue with the previous one. There's like a little bit more to say.
Okay, yeah, sure.
It feels like, especially with the initial invitation around like the exploring the kind of spiritual
Yeah,
aspect of it,
yeah, of course.
where I actually just wrote an essay about this yesterday, but um, among the gifts that like keeps giving here is so I tweeted about this also, but like I've now spent a lot of time like looking at old baby photos and just like having again and again this like overwhelming experience of like holy fuck, like I was so loved. Like there's all these photos and like they'll like it's just like my parents playing with me. It's just like every photo is just filled with love and it's like pages upon pages, like volumes upon volumes. And it's like these are like but snapshots of like endless days where like I was just receiving the loving attention of my parents and like just like Garden of Eden kind of thing, like just and like I spent like multiple, it's just like long sessions just like with this like overwhelming like tears, gratitude, like what did I do to deserve like this miracle? So there's like that experience and actually like I won't share about all of the implications since, but like what it's left me with is and this it still feels like it's, like developing and percolating, but it's like totally changed how I relate to those who have come before me, where historically I would have related to those who came before me as like low level disdain and like resentment. Like, right, thanks, but like now we gotta clean up after your mess, whether it's like climate change or intergenerational trauma or like whatever. It's like great, like thanks. Um, but now I'm like now it feels completely different and it's still changing, but it's I'm like how did I receive all this love? Like it is such an honor to be part of like to have received so much love from my mom and dad and like their parents before them and their parents before and like this like unbroken chain like
Yeah,
countless generations
yeah.
of like overwhelming love
Heartbreaking. Yeah.
that has just like and has come to me and it's like oh like I am part of this, like I am part of something bigger than me,
Mhm.
and like it's like felt. It's like still only like felt a little bit, but it's felt. It's like I mean, it's markedly different from how it was even just like a year ago or two. And I feel like it speaks to this like at least to some extent to like this oneness experience, like the separation and versus the like oh, one with the universe, dude. Um, which is great. Um, and I feel much more connected to my parents, to my lineage, to my family, to my culture, to everything actually as a result of this work. Um, in a way that's like really like satisfying and meaningful. Um, yeah.
Yeah, in the light of that, I want to know more about like surely there was a lot of hurt that you were carrying and what you were talking about earlier that you did feel unlovable and so there were certain experiences that where you felt unloved and yeah, given that we all are flawed individuals and our parents are carrying their own traumas, it's completely natural that they did fail to love you in a lot of ways and that any hurt, any anger around that was justified. And so I imagine like before arriving at this point that oh you were so loved, there was a lot of forgiving, a lot of accepting, grieving, and yeah, before we go into the building capacity thing, I would want to go into that uh, because there is no denying that, and before and to be able to get to the place where you got to, you have to go through the grieving and accepting and forgiving and allowing yourself to be angry and yeah, all of that. And so, what was the ugly bit of all of it like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of very ugly bits. And yeah, I don't think it's possible to get to the other side without it. And even more than that, I mean, like, so there's like the solo stuff, right? There's like the
Yeah,
the IFS sessions with the crying. There's like the anger release with the screaming and the roaring and the pushing and like you fucked me, like the fuck yous, like a lot of
yeah,
fuck yous, like time after time, like slowly whittling away at it, slowly chipping away at it, slowly like bringing it to the surface. Yeah, there's tons of that. Um, but I
and
almost
how,
actually like that. Sorry.
yeah, I just wanted to add one more question. How much of it also came up in those 2.5 months when you were with your mother? And how did she receive it? And I imagine like things also came up for her. But yeah, feel free to answer that later. You were saying
Yeah,
something.
definitely. Yeah, I wanted to go to that actually because that part feels bigger. Like the solo stuff was important, and it's like, oh, like there's like more, like arguably way more when it's like with a real human in front of me. Where like at a high level, what I would say, what happened in those 2.5 months with my mom was like me holding her accountable and her hearing and understanding the impacts of some of her actions, and me better understanding her and clearing up misunderstandings, which ultimately like created trust. It rebuilt trust, which I think is actually like foundational. Like that, I think is like the most important thing that can only happen with the other human.
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't think there's any amount of solo work that can happen that rebuilds trust because it's like inherently a relational thing.
yeah,
And that trust was foundational to, a few weeks later receiving that text from my mom because I actually believed her. Like that, I think actually receiving the text is not the hard part. Believing the text is the hard part.
yeah.
And so that got ugly, dude. Like, like I'd say around halfway in, like halfway through that that 2.5 months, like we started to get to like the really tender stuff, like mutual exile kind of territory, where like I was sharing stuff like I don't feel like you love me, and that was like really really hard for her. Um, yeah, I remember she like be constantly trying to be like, see how much I've done for she's in desperation, she's losing it too.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, like I'm really grateful that at that point we had some prior relationship to like a therapist who we were able to see. So I'd say like that last month was arguably the most intense month of my life. Um, in terms of just like, yeah, it was like every few days we were like unpacking like a multi-decade misunderstanding. It's like letting out like judgments and like anger that have been like piled up for decades, like hearing her side of it, like the catharsis, the like long crying, the unburdening, the like just like man, like if you feel like you gotta get unburdened in an IFS session, like have one of these conversations with your mom, man. Like, yeah.
And when you went to Taiwan, did you go with this explicit intention that you also communicated to her that, like, did you explicitly create this container with her that I want to go into these difficult feelings with you and that I want to repair my relationship with you?
Sort of. it wasn't so clear, it wasn't so explicit. Because there's also a way in which like I didn't know what it was going to be also.
Yeah,
But I was just, yeah, like I want to like the intention of like I want to like improve my relationship with my mom. Like that was understood.
yeah.
Um, but like what that would look like. I mean, it's not like she cert she certainly wasn't like, yes, let's do it. You know, like she wasn't gung ho. Like she was um yeah.
And early on, when I read out your tweets, you used this uh, line where you said you could trust your trust and distrust in the process. And yeah, I would love for you to elaborate on that, what it meant and how that was crucial to you building trust in that relationship.
In one sense, yeah, I think like there's it's like trusting my experience and trusting that like other things that I wanted to bring up were important. And I feel like forgiveness is a loaded term. It like means multiple things.
Mhm.
There's like a version of it that's like, oh, do I like like I'm forgiving you in the sense that like I'm no longer making you evil or bad, and I can extend compassion and acceptance to you and how you've shown up. And there's a version of forgiveness that's like restoring trust. That's like I forgive you for this and I trust that like there's a spectrum, but like you won't or you'll try not to like hurt me in this way in the future or something. And like I believe that you are capable of that or something like that. And so it's not like I was like blindly forgiving her. It was like, oh, like until like I believe that you actually, you know, like don't lord this over me or don't have this perspective or like whatever it is, have this perspective or like then I continue to distrust her about it. Um, I think actually that aspect of it, like I was writing in terms of like I'm like thinking of that tweet, and I think I was thinking about it in terms of how I relate to like other like to spirit like most spiritual faiths, spirit religions. Like most of them have this whole element of like just you have to trust, you just have to have the faith. And I'm like, I didn't just have to have the faith. Like I just trusted my mom up until the bitter end. At the point I was like, oh wait, I actually do trust her on this. Um, yeah, and something about that feels really important. It feels like real and like resilient and like yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's also this thing that when, let's say, you are in a romantic relationship and when both of you have done the inner work and both of you are versed with these relational practices and tools that can make it easier to navigate conflict. And even then, it can get really intense. In this case, when you're doing something like this with your parents, like your parents are not equipped with those tools, they have not done the inner work, they don't have the techniques or the skills to non-violently communicate what they are saying. And yeah, curious what it was like for you, given that dynamic that you might be opening up to her, you might be saying something really vulnerable, but what if she does not have the skill to hold that vulnerability? How are you navigating experiences like that?
Yeah. So yeah, she certainly doesn't have the tools. She doesn't know what any of this stuff is. I sent her an NBC article once. I don't even think she read it. You know, like um it was challenging, certainly, coming from environments where like people were speaking this language. Um, whether it was at this residency or I spent some time in Bali where I was like doing this stuff. But also feels like really important. It's like this is the real world. Like this is real life. It's like, oh, like if the tools only work when the other people are also using the tools, like they have limited effectiveness. And that was something like I was kind of on a side quest. That was a side quest of mine, ulterior motive of like wanting to find out like does this shit actually work? Or does it only work in this like narrow sandbox? Um, turns out it does. But it's hard. Um, yeah, it would be frustrating at times. Throughout the experience, I had this internal experience of like, I am trying so hard. I'm doing all this work. I'm doing all the heavy lifting. Like, like I wish my mom would meet me there. I wish my mom would be able to do it too. Like, it's like so hard. Um, I think that aspect of it faded over time, especially towards the end. Like in retrospect, like it's like, yes, given that my mom didn't have the tools, like she was trying her best too. And I could see it. I could see the effort. I could see the energy. I could see the, like her showing up. I could see the like I said, I trusted it because I could see it. That it like it wasn't what I was wanting or hoping for, but like the effort was just clearly being made. Um, and I would say what's cool about it is there's obviously a spectrum of this, but and especially when it was like me and like we also had the support of like the therapist. It's like there's a way in which like if I show up from a place of presence, like it kind of like presence wins or something. Like it kind of sucks the other person in a little bit to it. Like it's not like she was like full like, but like if I'm sharing from that place, she's more likely to share from that place too. Um, which she would sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah, presence wins.
Um,
And I guess, yeah, I think this, what you're talking about also bridges to the fourth pillar of building capacity, that to be able to hold so much emotional charge and welcome so many triggers and to not lash out or snap back requires a lot of capacity, internal and external. And yeah, would love for you to go into that.
yeah. Yeah, this one's huge. This is a piece that I don't think I hear many people talk much about. Um, because like even in the way that you shared it, like I want to clarify, like, oh, I certainly lashed out. Like I certainly was like I would certainly get triggered. I certainly like actually like all this was only possible because I enrolled so much external capacity. Otherwise it would have been the same patterns. Like maybe a few times I might have like been able to shift it, but it's
Mhm.
like where like for reference, what I had was like so prior to going to Taiwan, I was like I at least had the foresight to think like, oh, like I'm probably gonna be triggered as hell all the time. And so plan A is to get like when triggered to notice that I'm triggered and to like exit the situation and like get some support, get on a call, like vent, get some empathy, self-connect, and then return from that place from a place of having like, you know, processed that.
Mhm.
Um, and so I ended up asking a bunch of people, like, hey, would you be open to being in a WhatsApp group where like I just like make requests for support? And if you're free, great. If you're not free, also great.
Mhm.
It turns out most people were down for that. And so I ended up with this group of like 30 something people, um, which was like incredible, like a fucking superpower, honestly. I I haven't used it in a while, but I've still periodically like reached out um in it. And yeah, like so critical. So critical to have that. I feel like all but like maybe like twice someone responded within like 10 minutes. And that was just like, yeah, to be able to get that kind of support totally change.
Yeah,
Because like I'd be like, oh, like I could have this conflict with my mom, and then I could return like after half an hour, and we could like resolve it, as opposed to like it just remains unresolved for the rest of our lives, which is often how these conflicts go.
yeah,
Or yeah, we forget about it, we like push it under the rug, we kind of try and pretend it didn't happen.
yeah, yeah. That feels like a cheat code.
Yeah, yeah. So that was huge. I talked about having the therapist is like in the hardest conversations. Like, yeah, we had a professional there who's like her we're paying her there basically to offer capacity and her
Yeah,
expertise. Um, yeah. So yeah, I would say like none of the like absolutely none of this would not have been possible like without like superhuman kind of support. Um, and yeah, it's like this stuff like I would say like you're not supposed like this stuff is too big. Like this stuff is too big for one person. Like you're not supposed to do it alone.
yeah.
Um, and so like I was like the wrong like trying to do it alone is just like yeah, it's like doomed and like miss like I'm trying to put a square hole peg in a round hole or something like that. Like that's just like a category error. Yeah. Um, and so I think this is one of the things that I'm most grateful for, like for micro solidarity and like the crewing. It's like, oh, like in that process, like of like starting all these crews and having all these crews, like, oh, it turns out I have a bunch of people that I like trust to like hold some space for me emotionally and at least like listen. Um, like yeah, that was like a majority of the people that I drew upon for like this group.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're helping someone deepen their relationship with their parents, if you were designing some kind of uh, protocol or practice around this, like what would be the 80/20 of it?
Hmm. I guess the thought that I'm with right now is like, oh, like I don't know enough about it to generalize or something,
Mhm.
or like like different people's situations.
Yeah,
So I feel like I'm primarily going to be projecting here, but which is okay. As like given that that I would be projecting here. Um, mm, honestly, I would start with the social support, the capacity. It's like good friends who like you can talk to about stuff, and then talk to them about this stuff, and then go from there.
yeah. I'm starting to feel complete uh, on the conversation. Are there any areas that you'd like to touch that you think we might have missed and you feel are, yeah,
Mm.
vital to your experience?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm like, what's some like tension here in my chest and everything. Feeling into it. Mm, it smells like hopelessness or something. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a part of me that like so much wants like people to have this experience, and to have these like incredible like fruits. Like, it's just, like so incredible. Um, and all this sense of like I don't know how to get people there. Just like even like the time alone. Like I don't know how to get anyone to like spend that kind of time on anything other than other than the jobs.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, like I feel like I have just like paltry, a paltry like make better, make more friends. Like it's like such a it feels like a paltry tip or something. It's like yeah, like no shit, Sherlock. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I feel like yeah, it's like if someone was in it, like had the time, was like spending, it was like oh, like I have so much to offer. And it's like oh, like someone who like doesn't who is like going from 0 to 1. It's like I don't actually have that much to offer other than like dingling the fruits of like it's pretty fucking awesome for me. Like I don't know, like does it sound good to you? Like it's kind of hard to even describe what's so awesome about it. Like I'm trying my best. Like I don't know if it's landing. I'm guessing it's not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
One thing that I would like to add, what has been helpful for me is just grieving their inevitable deaths, like grieving my parents' inevitable death, like just sitting with that and just, yeah, I think the grief and the heartbreak that emerges from it does something, like just softens the heart, allows for forgiveness,
Hmm.
and also gives a bit of a sense of urgency that I'll regret not having so many conversations uh, if they were to die tomorrow. And yeah, just sitting with that, allowing that to fully touch me. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, move something within me.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah, I do that sometimes also. Yeah, so I can relate and resonate. Yeah, my story of it is it's basically like it like reminds me of how much I love them. Like and the love
Yeah,
that's there. Like past all the stories and crap, it's like, oh, there's so much love here. And it's so valuable to like reground in that.
yeah, yeah. That's also something about seeing their humanity that for the longest time we have boxed them in this role of being a mother or a father, and then we're so carrying so much,
Yeah.
yeah,
Forget they're human, or maybe never even.
agitation or anger that they failed in so many ways, like they failed as a father or a mother, and and then we're boxing them in that role and also boxing ourselves in the role of a son or a daughter.
Totally.
And yeah, that makes things difficult because then it's hard to see and accept their flaws and our own flaws and seeing them as human who tried their best, fucked up in a lot of ways, blessed us in so many ways, and that
Yeah.
here we are. And I had this feeling some weeks ago when I really touched into that, just so much heartbreaking gratitude for all the love that I did receive. And
Mm.
this feeling towards my father that why is this man not my best fucking friend in the world? Like anything less than that feels like a tragedy.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe it's meant to be like that, and things cannot be perfect because of all the pain that we are carrying. And but yeah, there's so much room for so much more love in the relationship. And also it feels like one of those relationships where it's okay to make a lot of mistakes. Like if I were to like fuck up in a romantic relationship, there would be the risk of just completely losing that person. Yeah, these are your parents at the end of the day. They are not going anywhere and you're not going anywhere. Yeah, with certain exceptions. But yeah, you can just go in there and like make mistakes that you don't have to do it as perfectly as the pressure that you would feel compared to say in a friendship or a romantic relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. So, yeah. There's nothing that anyone can do that would make them not your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like so much, yeah, security that can be taken in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also hear this like this beautiful like it's like desire to honor the love that is there. It's like, oh, like if I'm anything less than like close connection is like dishonoring
Yeah.
the love that's
Yeah. And I guess we also underestimate their love that given their experience of being a father and a mother, which I certainly have no experience with, but I imagine that's like just like infuses them with so much love, and like they probably have a bigger capacity to forgive us than we have to forgive them.
yeah. Yeah, when you talk about roles, there's a whole like tangent I can go on about roles, but yeah. I
Yeah, feel free to.
yeah, just like really briefly, it's like, oh, like once I start to cut touch the human, like human to human and like past the roles, like that's a really important and powerful that like that's a really important process. And one of the things that comes out of that process is like, in my experience at least, like a lot of like humility,
Mhm.
like self-responsibility, and like embarrassment even. It's like, oh, like, well, if I want my mom to treat me like an adult, I have to act like an adult. Duh. But like if I keep acting like a fucking child around her and demand that she meets my needs while I don't care about her needs, like that's not gonna work. Like that, you know? Um, yeah, there's like something humbling in that. It's like, oh, well, I gotta be an adult here also. Like if I want it, like I gotta act the part if I want the part. Um,
Yeah, I think this probably also connects to just opening yourself up to receiving the love. I think that goes hand in hand. That yeah, you can want that love, crave for that love, and ask for that love, but can be closed off to that love.
so,
Yeah, and you keep just repelling it, and that repelling of that love can then show up in twisted ways in which you are, I don't know, just yeah, recreating those dysfunctional patterns. Like as you are, like all of us are as much, yeah, part of keeping those patterns in place as our parents are.
totally. I'm curious, how has this conversation been for you?
And this is definitely a topic that's close to my heart, and it's also an area where I have a lot of dissatisfaction with myself. Like I feel like there's so much more that I can show up in this area, and yeah, definitely inspires me to show up with more heart and create that space and time. And yeah, even though things are good, I don't know, find ways to bring in vulnerability. And there's always some truth that I can speak that might shake things up, but just deepen that connection. And Yeah, one thing that I do want to do more of uh, in the coming years as I hopefully lean into this practice more is so what you have done on the Twitter, like sharing your stories and like what has worked for you, what did not work for you, etc. In other areas, in other spiritual practices, like reading about other people's journeys, like multiple people's journeys from multiple perspectives, like multiple techniques, multiple approaches, that was really crucial for me in my self-exploration journey. And I wish that if this could be a practice that more people like intentionally took up as a practice, that like people take up meditating an hour every day as a practice,
Yeah.
uh, then there would be more conversations uh, around this stuff. There would be more yeah, wisdom that would accumulate around this stuff. And I think that would create a lot of good in the world. And I think a lot of the problems that people are trying to solve through a lot of other practices, um, I think it's possible to, yeah, spend much less time, of course, with much more intensity and quote unquote solve those problems by deepening your relationship with your parents. And so, yeah, like having one heartfelt, vulnerable conversation with one of your parents can be worth hundreds of hours on the cushion potentially. And
Yeah.
this is also just me saying that out loud to myself, like just as a reminder to show up more in that relationship.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and I would also love for there to be more people doing this and talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As we move toward closing, yeah, for those who are listening, I'm going to link your set of thread of threads where you have talked about your interactions with your mother and what it was like for you. Yeah, I think just reading that and yeah, reading your story, I think that in itself can be a really valuable thing. Like, yeah, you did not give very explicit advice towards the end, but I think those stories in themselves have a lot of implicit advice and implicit, uh,
Mhm.
yeah, strategies and yeah, what kind of stance or orientation one can take in an endeavor like this. And so, yeah, I'll close with that.
Yeah. Sweet. Thank you, Thea.